Hi, welcome to Tech Leader TV. I'm your host, John Thomas Flynn, and believe it or not, this is our 9th season of TLTV, and we continue with a stellar lineup of topics and guests, the show that everyone's talking about, a live streaming video webcast and cable television program focusing on public sector, information technology, and the political landscape. We come to you today courtesy of our sponsors, Unisys, LexisNexis, Xerox, Dimension Data, Veeam, Comcast, Tanium, Kronos, Optum, Gigaman, and Next Level. And finally, Flynn Associates, a California-certified small business enterprise and trusted advisors for strategic IT business development, marketing, and solution services. And thanks for watching. The Tech Leader TV website continues to set new audience records. We're reaching thousands of state IT decision makers and vendor partners who recorded a quarter of a million page views last month alone. We recorded 2 million views last year, and our goal is to double that in 2016. We're well on our way. And we have a very special guest today with Mark Ghilarducci, the Director of the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. But before we get started, and I introduce Mark and begin our conversation today, as usual, I'm going to request your indulgence to allow me to pontificate, if I may, on pressing issues of the day. Two very significant and very ironic IT-related events have drawn Tech Leader TV's interest over the last month or so. Both are related to the state's mega project, Fiscal, the cleverly phonetic acronym for the $840 million Financial Information System for California. The project, now in its 4th year of implementation, is years behind schedule and hundreds of millions over budget, and not estimated to be completed for another 3 or 4 years. By then, one can expect that its final cost will be well north of $1 billion. Fiscal was originally conceived as a replacement for the California Department of Finance's legacy financial system, CalSTARS, which was the brainchild of Cap Weinberger, then Governor Reagan's finance director. That gives you some idea of how old it is. Now there are reports that the Department of Finance has decided not to operate Fiscal when completed, but will hand it off to perhaps the Government Operations Agency. So the Department of Finance now won't own the state's new financial system. Go figure. However, that brings us up to a second issue. As reported in the LA Times just last week, the governor and the legislature's new budget agreement gutted Fiscal's operating budget language, which previously had stipulated that Fiscal would provide a publicly available website to identify specific department budgets and spending transactions and the reason for the expenditure, along with other comprehensive, detailed data points, all available to the public, all for greater transparency, all good stuff, and all are standard data and reporting capabilities of current enterprise financial systems, including Fiscal. And these capabilities were highlighted every previous year in Fiscal's ongoing legislation going back to 2011. Fiscal's contribution to government transparency was one of its major selling points when the Department of Finance was ushering its ever-increasing budget through the legislature. Not anymore. This isn't transparency. I don't know what it is. Then again, maybe it's just a going-away present from the Department of Finance. Here's a warning to the Government Operations Agency, to paraphrase Virgil, beware of Department of Finance bearing gifts. I think this issue, as they say, is developing. Well, as usual on Tech Leader TV, we're going to continue to do our best to keep the spotlight on the state's management of its annual multi-billion-dollar IT investment to make government more effective and efficient and secure. And hopefully we'll have a little fun and keep your interest along the way. Our motto is simple. As I like to say, California can always do better. Let's begin the journey now with our discussion on technology, government, politics, and as I like to say, other unnatural acts. I'll be right back with our guests in just a moment, and we'll begin. Hi, and welcome back to Tech Leader TV. As I mentioned, our guest today is Mark Ghilarducci, who's the Director of the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. He, I guess, just appointed just about 3 years ago. And prior to that, he was the Secretary of the California Emergency Management Agency. As a member of the cabinet, Director Ghilarducci serves as the governor's Homeland Security Advisor and also oversees state public safety, emergency management, emergency communications, counterterrorism, state threat assessment system, etc. In addition, prior to that, he was a consulting officer with the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Office, FEMA, and also spent some time with the California State Fire Chief. Well, Mark, welcome to Tech Leader TV.
Happy to be here. Yeah, thank you.
I tell you, we always say that we always worry that our guests aren't going to be called away in an emergency, but certainly that was a higher level of probability in a case like yours, and living in California, where seems like every news article is about some crisis of some kind.
Yeah.
It's
the state
we don't
of
have
crisis.
to ask you what keeps you up at night. I certainly don't think so. We talked a little bit about this, but tell me a little bit more about your background, how you got into this kind of a living, because you spent most of your life now in emergency management.
Yeah, I mean, my career has really been in public safety, starting early on, actually as a volunteer, but then as a first responder at the local level, and then through the fire service. My focus has always been what we call special operations, is very, sort of complex situational management. That sort of just kind of carried on as the years went on. I ended up going to the University of California at Davis. Was actually going to go to medical school, but the state actually reached out and wanted to design a new program that built a specialized rescue capability, and it was so intriguing to me that I just had to jump in and did that for a number of years.
That's when you majored in was it physiology?
Yeah, I was a human physiology major. So you wonder, how does that kind of correlate? Well, when you go into med school, you got to do those kind of things. But
that makes sense now.
Yeah. So then I went to work for FEMA for a while as a presidential appointee to manage disasters around the country. Then came back to the Office of Emergency Services, and then went in the private sector for 12 years.
Okay.
The
dreaded private sector.
Well, I actually, the dreaded, for me, it was a wonderful opportunity, because it really gave me the opportunity to take sort of certain things I learned in government and then apply them into the private world,
Sure.
and then learn from the private sector and make that correlation. So I think that there's always got to be a strong partnership between public and private. I think I kind of emulate that now because of my experiences. Eventually, when Governor Brown became governor, he reached out and asked that I come in and take this job, and so I.
Well, I think it's very important to have that private sector and government experience, particularly when you're in leadership positions, because man, a lot of times you come in from the private sector and have never been in government before. I mean, you have to turn your hat real crooked sometimes to make sense of things. We all know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and one is mission focused and one is sort of bottom line focused, but there's definitely correlations. And when you think about crisis management, emergency management, resiliency, business continuity, all of those have areas where they cross over very, very nicely.
Right. And that's probably something we'll get into a little bit more as we're talking about your mission and the enterprise security and all those other issues. But tell me about your organization. I believe you have almost 1,000 employees.
Yeah, I think we're somewhere around 1,800 or so now. We have a statewide footprint.
Okay.
We have a very broad mission set. We are in the governor's office, part of the governor's cabinet. Our role is ensuring for a coordinated, effective approach to planning and preparedness, and then responding to emergencies, and then the ability to recover effectively. So like when you take the big fires that we had last year, for example, that burned through parts of Calaveras and Lake County, where large number, we lost like 2,700 homes. There was infrastructure damage. Or the Napa earthquake, for example. We not only coordinate and are involved with responding and coordinating how effectively you manage all those resources to meet objectives that are set forth during an incident period, but then we coordinate with the federal government and with others to go in and rebuild those communities afterwards. So, but we're very broad. We've got the emergency management responsibilities. We've got, which include a division of law enforcement. We've got a very robust law enforcement capability. We have our own fire and rescue department within the agency that manages fire suppression activities and rescue. And then we've got our emergency management programs, including our regional operations throughout the state. In addition, we're the Homeland Security's agency for California. So all of the security in a state that obviously is the 7th largest economy in the world, 40 million people, big urban centers. We've got 11 ports. We've got an international border, multiple airports. Security in California is a heavy lift.
Yes, I should say so.
We're working that all the time as well. And then we've got all the 911 public safety communications in the state, so all the 911 centers. And then we've got a whole victim services unit, so all of the rape crisis centers, human trafficking task forces, domestic violence shelters, those types of things all fall under OES as well. So it's a busy place.
Right. And I would assume, I think your budget's anywhere $1.5 billion to $2 billion.
About that, yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
and a lot of it's probably federally funded, huh?
There's a big portion that are federal grants and federally funded, but we've got I think the state general fund is somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 million, something like that.
Well, looking at the current year we just finished, really, what were some of the major initiatives that your office was involved in?
Well, so many, but probably the most externally facing initiatives include. Well, the first is a new initiative to deal with these massive trains carrying hazardous materials coming into the state. We've seen massive explosions. We just had one 2 weeks ago in Oregon, where the rail is carrying this Balkan crude, and not just Balkan crude, but all the different kinds of hazardous materials coming in to the state. We're building a much more robust situational awareness and hazardous materials response capabilities for these kind of catastrophic incidents. We also have a new initiative to build out a state earthquake early warning system. And this is kind of a unique situation because it's building on technology that's been created and science that's been sort of evolved through the seismologists and geophysicists to be able to sense initial energy waves that are emitted when an earthquake occurs, to be able to get that even before the shaking occurs.
Yeah, before it occurs, right.
There's something called the P wave, or the primary wave, this energy that gets emitted. We've got technology that can sense that, and depending on where you're at in correlation to the epicenter of a quake, where the rupture is, you can get anywhere between a few seconds to up to 90 seconds of warning. So you think, wow, 90 seconds, not very much. But you can do a lot in being able to, if you know an earthquake's coming, to drop, cover, and hold, get underneath something that's safe. But if you're
shut down a nuclear power plant?
If you're in infrastructure, transportation, health and medical,
it's a big deal.
Your lifelines, water, power, etc., you can shut those down and minimize the amount of impact.
And I read where Japan actually had that, and it did save substantial number of lives and property, but obviously it's something that California could certainly use.
Well, it can, and we're a big seismically active state. If you live in California, you're an earthquake country.
Right.
But it also is challenged because California is long, and the topography and the way the demographics are set up, it takes a lot of a unique, capability, but we want to make sure we have a reliable system that doesn't have any false positives, and so that's part of what we're implementing now.
Right. Well, as we chatted a little bit about that, this was a fascinating article in the New Yorker magazine just about a year ago, and I just want to read a small portion of this. When the next big earthquake hits the northwest edge of the continent, from California to Canada, and the continental shift to the Cascades will drop by as much as 6 feet and respond 30 to 100 feet to the west. Some of that shift will take place beneath the ocean. The water will surge upward into a huge hill, then promptly collapse in a 700-mile liquid wall that will reach the northwest coast on average 15 minutes after the earthquake begins. By the time the shaking is ceased and the tsunami has receded, the region will be unrecognizable. And according to Ken Murphy, the Regional 10 FEMA manager, said, "Our operating assumption is that everything west of Interstate 5 will be toast." Right. So we're okay here in Tech Leader
pressure,
TV.
Though, right? Is
no
what
pressure.
You're telling me.
That's
what keeps
an
me
amazing.
up
We
at
always
night?
think about
You may
San
wanna-
Andreas, and this is the what is it? The subduction of the
Cascadia
Cascades.
subduction zone. It's a fault system, and quite frankly, subduction zone earthquakes are very dangerous kind of quakes. Those fault systems, typically offshore. It's the kind of earthquake that occurred recently, the Tohoku earthquake in Japan. It's designed so fault systems either go side by side, or which is a strike slip kind of fault system. That's the San Andreas.
Right.
Or a subduction zone where one fault slips underneath the other. When that does, it tends to push up the land. If it's offshore, of course, that creates not only a strong ground shaking, but it can create this massive tsunami wave.
And it's funny you're showing your hands, because that's exactly what the article, the author talks about, is how your hands would collapse and then your fingers would be this and your wrist would be
Try
that.
to explain it,
But it's easy, it makes a lot of sense, and it's
and we have a portion of Cascadia that goes basically from Mendocino County north up, and then of course it goes into Oregon and Washington, Canada. The fault zone can produce up to a magnitude 9 quake, and it is a concern of ours, and that part of the state, of course, is very, what I would say, remote by comparison to some of our other urban centers.
Right.
So the complexity for us is not just the deal with the earthquake and the resulting tsunami, but having the ability to set up long-term logistics support and getting resources in there after the quake occurs. But really, it's really going to be a big impact to Oregon and Washington, and we work very closely with our partner states to be able to prepare for that.
Right. And of course, we don't want to alarm any of our Tech Leader TV viewers out there, but this could occur next year, and it could occur 100 years from now, or 1,000 years.
Now.
Yeah.
And the point is that being prepared is important. Having a plan, if you're a business, having a continuity plan, knowing what to do, backup systems if you're IT. These are all things that a little bit of investment now will result in tremendous benefits later. We know that up to 87% of small businesses never actually recover after a disaster. So it's really important to put some effort in on the front end.
Wow. Well, that's the old saying: the cobbler has no shoes.
Yeah.
What's the personal evacuation plan, the personal emergency plan for the Ghilarducci household?
Well,
Do you have 2 months of food stocked away?
Well,
I have a cabin up in the Sierra.
No, I don't. I wish I did. I do have a go pack within the family. Go pack. Everybody's has a family plan. We have a communications plan. Of course, my kids are different parts of the state, and so we've got a way to be able to connect with somebody out of the state, because that's probably going to be, if the phone lines are down, you're going to be able to call out of the state than in the state. We have a rally point so that we know where people need to go within the state, so we can check on them. And then I live in a high fire zone area, so we are very well versed on, as a family, on understanding what a warning is, and when they say evacuate, don't dilly-dally, evacuate. Unfortunately, we lose people every year in fires because they're not evacuating.
Right.
But if you're in an earthquake zone, if you're down in the Bay Area or in Los Angeles or some of the other areas that have high fault areas, then you need to have a family plan, but you also consider earthquake insurance. Protect your investments and understand what will happen after a big earthquake in the Bay Area, for example, or LA. You're going to be sort of without services for a period of time. So the more you empower yourself, the better off you're going to be as an individual or family to withstand that in the long term.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting and good advice.
Yeah.
One of the things we wanted to talk about with our guests on Tech Leader TV is the whole issue of aligning business with technology, something that a lot of times is very, very difficult to do. And I know that we've had an opportunity to work with you over the last couple of months, and we've noticed that with you, you have your CIO, Carla Simmons, you have your CISO, Michael Cruz. They're with you here in the audience today. How do you ensure that? Because a lot of directors, a lot of executives in government, they don't see the need for that alignment. How do you ensure that it works for CalOES?
Well, let me just say first, I've got great people, and they, I really depend on their advice. I listen to it. That's one of the first things, and I think it's very important to understand that we, particularly in our organization, but I would say this probably rings true to most organizations, but in public safety, we have moved to a technology-driven platform. Situational awareness, being able to get real-time, fast data being able to understand the complexity, the scope, and the characteristic of an emergency or disaster has to happen immediately so that we can respond effectively and save lives and property. That means that we need to operate with our IT partners in a way that they are critical for our success. Understanding that, and whether you're an emergency services organization or some other organization, understanding that we as a society are moving to a Internet of Things world, and so that's been the first part. The second part is knowing that I think maybe from my private sector experience is that there has to be, government doesn't have all the answers, and we certainly do not have all the resources. So leveraging what has been done, particularly in a state as innovative as California, and bringing those resources to the table is absolutely critical for us to do. One challenge, though, is that there's a lot of, you have to filter through what is usable and what's not. And I think executives sometimes, particularly in government, are afraid that a IT project or something where you're dealing with IT may fail, and you're going to cost a lot of money, and it is expensive. So that's where it gets back to loop around to your people, making sure that you've got good communications, good performance objectives, and a set of collective strategies within your organization, and that seems to have helped us pretty well.
Right. Well, let's talk about the organization. Let's talk about security, because it certainly is it's part of everything. It's underpinning for so many things we talk about when it comes to technology today and business operations in general. And one of the things we've done is we saw the state auditor report that came out. You testified at the hearing. I think the report said that up to 90% of departments are not in compliance with policies, security policies of the state. And that was really a disheartening indictment. Now, what's going to happen now? What's the situation with security? As I understand it, you said, when we ask about the department, the state office, the Office of the State Information Security Authority, that's now over at your facility. How do you explain that?
Well, this is the way. Well, let me just back up to the auditor's report and just say that the hearing that took place a couple of months ago really had the auditor come and speak about audit findings that they had found over a year before. They were sort of old. That didn't really come out in the hearing. There's been a lot that has been done over the last couple of years, and quite frankly, our Department of Technology has worked hard to establish capabilities and do assessments. That said, when you look at the nation state of California and the totality of the number of state agencies and departments, it is a heavy lift to get where we need to get to. And part of that is getting executives and other administration officials to truly understand what is the threat and frame that threat and understand that it's okay to identify a vulnerability as long as there's a plan to put something in place. What's happened, though, is that right around 2013, we recognized in the security side that this threat of cyber attacks was starting to really increase. And they've been around for a while, but we really started to see through our intelligence networks an increase, a spike up of the amount of intrusions, whether it be from hacktivists or from state-sponsored either criminal organizations or nation states that were actually coming in to try to steal information or personal information, God forbid, to actually maybe do something to impact our infrastructure. So we established a cybersecurity task force back in 2013 that really brought together the public and private sectors and academia to begin that dialogue within California to really start to address what are we looking at and how do we address the threat. From that came a series of recommendations that moved forward through the Department of Technology, as well as the governor establishing an executive order that established what's called the California Cybersecurity Integration Center. And this center is really taking the intelligence community that falls under Homeland Security, the State Chief Information Security Office, the Department of the Military National Guard, which has robust capabilities, and the California Highway Patrol, which has the responsibility from a criminal predicate standpoint for doing investigations, and the Attorney General's Office, which has a forensics responsibility, and bringing them under an umbrella of a joint sort of effort, an integrated effort, if you would, to be able to look at what are the threats and implement mitigation measures. The CISO.
Is there a name for that group?
Yeah,
is that the task force?
No, the task force is this public-private group that's providing advice into it. This is the California Integrated California Cybersecurity Integration Center, CalSIC.
CalSIC, that's
CalSIC, right.
Okay.
And what's happened is that the CISO, which is still part of the Department of Technology, has embedded that office in the CalSIC. OES, my agency, as the Homeland Security Agency, has the overarching responsibility for coordinating and ensuring that all of these sort of funnels of information come together in a collaborative way. The CHP, the CalGuard, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, all of them now, and UC and CSU systems for academia are now co-located at one spot. To be able to share information. They all still have their day-to-day statutory responsibilities, but through this center, they're looking at a larger threat stream. They're sharing information, which is really a critical component to be able to not stovepipe information, but kind of what are you looking at, how are we dealing with it, and then they're implementing mitigation measures in real time. And this is really a tremendous step forward, and it's actually mirroring what they've built at the national level at the National Cybersecurity Integration Center and what's called the Multi-State Integration Center. It's an MSI-SAC. One's for private sector and one is for the public sector. Here we're pulling them all together. And so we're thinking that this is really going to go on and make a much more robust capability. It ties in all of our local governments, and it ties in the private sector because we've actually got private sector engagement within the center, as well as the utilities. And it takes our regional intelligence centers, we've got 5 throughout the state, and we're able to then funnel that intelligence information coming in.
Any word yet on an appointment of a new CISO?
I know that they're doing a national search, and they're looking for a new CIO and
See, we're looking for scoops here, you know.
Yes, I know. I wish I had one, but let me just say for the audience, if you're interested in a very dynamic and interesting job in a big state that's really moving on a lot of this stuff, it's a great opportunity.
Your staff just doubled to 24, I think.
Yeah, right.
I think there is. I think there's 10 or 12 new auditors.
Yeah, and then that's in the office of the, as I understand it, that's in the office of the Chief Information Security. The Department of Technology is a large organization. They actually have several hundred people. And they're working a lot of different things. But the CISO itself, so they're looking for we're looking for a CISO as well as a Chief Information Officer.
Well, one of the things that's going to be interesting, and as you know, if they do hire those 10 or 12 new auditors that are going to help with that compliance rate, right? Well, it's obvious they're going to go out and do these audiences and these audits, and as you mentioned, it makes sense for the business and the technology and the security people within those departments to have their shortcomings, if you will, identified, their challenges identified. But the problem's going to be, okay, you've got these problems identified, where's the money going to come from to address them? And that's really the challenge here.
It is a challenge, except that we are in a part of the integration center, part of the working group that is in the administration that's working these issues collectively and collaboratively, includes the Department of Finance. We're at a better time today than we've ever been in the past with being able to frame the threat, put parameters around what is the needs. To get to where we're at, though, we have to get a baseline on what the needs are. So we really stepped up, and AB 670, which is an assembly bill, actually helped us get there. But we've really stepped up the number of assessments that are being done annually, and that gives us a better idea about really where are the vulnerabilities, because a lot of state departments and agencies have actually been doing quite a bit of work, but we don't know, in totality where we're at. We know that there are gaps, but we also know that there's been a lot done. Yeah. And so once we get that, the Department of Finance recognizes that this is something that moving forward is going to need a line item budget. But right now, every department has been clearly told, and the leaderships, that look, this is a priority, and you need to repurpose funding within your department to ensure that those assessments are done immediately.
And that's actually what, when I was here during the year 2000 drill, and obviously that's exactly what we do. And I was CIO. If the department wanted new funding, if they hadn't had their year 2000 issues mitigated, they weren't allowed to get that new funding, and that really started the windfall, if you will, to get that addressed. And it was one of those things where you didn't have to get new money for it. We could take money that was already going to some of these envisioned projects. Yeah. And maybe that's something that the folks in charge will consider as they move forward, because it is going to be interesting when you have those auditors. In fact, State Auditor Elaine Howe, she was on this program a few months ago, before her report came out, and just when her report came out, that's right. And she maintains that it was that report that actually got that funding approved for those auditors. That it wasn't going to make it before, and whether that's true or not, but it sounds to me like it certainly reached a critical mass for the administration.
A lot of things came together at one time.
Yeah,
for sure. And as you know, in your background, timing is everything when it comes to these things. So as the key thing, though, I think for all of us is that no one, and I live in this world every day, should wait for a crisis to be able to put capability in place. We need to invest, appropriately on the front end.
Well, on that point, you were kind enough to be a keynote speaker at a recent event that I helped moderate, and that was with Tanium. And one of the issues, and I'm not sure, you might have had the lead before it was over, but at the very end, we had about 70 ISOs in that audience from about 40 different departments. And at the end, I asked for a show of hands among the ISOs who had sat down with their department director and had a frank discussion about security issues. And out of 50 people, 10 raised their hand. 20%, you know? And I think that's not unusual from the standpoint of the way it was in the year 2000. I mean, who have you really talked to at your director? So what do you tell those those directors, shall we say, and leadership, that this is something they really got to get behind until they, what I do? What I do is I send them out that video of OPM hearing before Congress. Yeah. And everybody had to raise their hand and take an oath before their interrogations, and those people, half of them lost their jobs over it. Yeah. But what do you tell these guys? I know a lot of them are real disappointed and worried that, they're not getting their message across and not given an opportunity to get their message across.
Well, part of this really...
You're the new champion on this, I
guess. I don't know if I'm the new champion, but I certainly have the responsibility vested by the governor for statewide security, and from that standpoint, ensuring that we as a state are resilient to all threats and hazards is one of my key responsibilities. That does not take the place of the state chief information security officer or the CIO, but it's one that ensures that we're all rowing in the right direction and in the same direction. With that said, part of it is the administration, and they are doing this. Started with the cybersecurity task force. Second, followed up with the governor's executive order directing state agencies to move forward with this. Thirdly, we've had several cabinet meetings, meeting with all cabinet secretaries and the governor, going over the priority for this and making sure that information gets pushed down to all the department directors. So each secretary.
Jerry Brown goes to cabinet meetings?
Well, he's attended them. Yeah. And there's meetings that are being held with the Department of Technology and the CISOs to begin that process of ensuring that it's two ways, from the CISO to the department director and from the cabinet secretary down through the agencies. That's then backed up with a campaign of directives and other kinds of additional support. And then we've begun these process of doing these mandatory assessments. And so we've issued directives to the departments that we've picked that are going through this process.
Are these the audits you're talking about?
These are the audits,
okay.
yes, right.
So they've already begun?
They have begun, yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought that funding was in the new budget, but I guess...
No, we did not wait for the funding. We may be able to use existing...
Statute, just go full speed ahead.
Well, you know, it's if I waited for money all the time, I would be behind the power curve, and so we can't really wait.
Statute was one of my old boss, Governor Welds. He said, "I'll take care of the law. You just get out there and get things done."
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So, have they completed some audits?
Completed several of the audits. Yes, we have. Yeah.
Any stories? What's some good stories coming out of that?
We've completed several of the audits.
Get my FOIA prepared.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Let me just say that I'm actually pleasantly surprised at what I've seen so far. There's actually we're not as bad as we.
Well, certainly it is that legislative hearing and the state auditor's report and other things have certainly galvanized the security community to make sure that they're prepared, because when those auditors come in, obviously it's not going to be something you can hide.
You know, it's a challenge in California. We have so many threats: earthquakes, fires, floods, from natural hazards, and then terrorism and cybersecurity. You know, there's just a lot coming in. So where do you go? I live it every day, and my team does, because that's what we do. But when you're a Secretary of Resources or a Secretary of Transportation, that's not what you're focusing on. You know. Right. It's another thing. So, you know, it's really us being able to make sure that part of my job is to be the little bug and bugging them about
the buttonhole.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit back to the drills. Every now and then on the news we'll see something about a drill, but you must be doing those year round.
We do a lot of drills.
Major.
Yeah, we do them. Department of Homeland Security, in the context of cybersecurity, Department of Homeland Security does them. Every year we do a cabinet drill with the cabinet members on cyber attacks. Each time we do a non-direct cyber drill, like we do an earthquake drill or we do a fire drill, we always tie in a cyber component, because there is a correlation to impact to networks from a natural disaster. So how you respond to an outage on a cyber outage, network outage from an earthquake, is maybe how, outside the criminal predicate, is how you're going to respond on the cascading impacts from a cyber attack. So we build those into as many exercises as we can.
Speaking of which, are there, other than the early warning earthquake system, are there any other technology or telecommunications initiatives that will be coming out with the new budget in the next few days? For 16, 17?
Well, not that I know. I mean, not that I can think of right this moment. Yeah. I mean, there's, we've got warning systems are in place for Amber Alerts. We're stepping that up. We've been working very closely with the federal government on what they call iPause, which is an ability to override the cell system and put. In fact, you may have gotten one of those during an Amber Alert. Just automatically your phone opens up and gives you an alert. So we're trying to work more of those kinds of things through the community. Public education is a big piece. Even though we're disaster-prone state, constant public education and re-education on what you need to do to prepare is really important.
Public safety communications, that's another one of those organizational shifts that came over from the agency of the Information Technology Department. A couple years ago now.
Yeah,
Carol Wong was still over there, I believe. Anything new there? I know there's a couple. That's a fascinating area, because we actually got involved with a few partners looking at the federal stimulus money on telecommunications grants for high broadband and all that, IHOP and that kind of acronyms. And we were involved with some of the, I think there's a couple hundred different microwave antennas throughout the state. It's a fascinating subject, and the organization itself is, I mean, it's so spread out, and the organizations, I think it's one of your largest departments.
It is. It's a very complex, and they do everything from, you're right on the fact that we've got one of the most robust infrastructure communication systems in the world. And when you think about the topography of California and being able to have reliable communications in the most remote areas, as well as the most urban areas, having those links and that capability is an ongoing system of maintenance and capability improvements. So
and
that's
not to
one
mention
piece.
with your fires and everything else.
Fires and of course we depend. Highway patrol, all the public safety entities at the local and state agencies depend on those systems. So, plus we're looking at moving into next gen 911, texting to 911. We're expanding and working with the federal government on this broadbanding initiative, what's called FirstNet, which is taking a spectrum that used to be open to other areas and being very just dedicated to public safety. Eventually, everybody's smartphone would be the way that we would communicate, and you'd be able to get video and information in all real time. That doesn't come without challenges, cybersecurity challenges. We are moving to a voice over IP communication system from the traditional system. That also comes with new challenges. So all of these things are all happening, and our Public Safety Communication Office is right in the middle of all of that. As well as looking at, we have 457 public safety answering points in California. These are your primary 911 centers. A lot of centers, yeah. And so we're looking at how can we make that more efficient? How can we regionalize that and make it more robust? As we look into the next 10 years, what we're doing today is really planning for the next 10 years. So, I'll only be here, I have a shelf life, and then I'm on my way. But what I'm doing now as the director is ensuring that we've got long-term sustainable plans for the future.
Well, it's a tough job, and certainly it's nice to have someone with your background and experience in there. Good luck. Good luck to you. We're thinking of you, and also all the security officials and CIOs out there. They all have a special place in TechLear TV's heart, considering our past lives. So I want to thank you very much for being on the show. It's been great. We look forward to your comments at our website, and please make your suggestions about who you'd like to see on the program, and comments are always published, and we look forward to reading them. As a matter of fact, we should have a pretty interesting program coming up this summer. We're looking at having someone from Fiscal come on and answer some questions. We're still trying to schedule Karen Johnson from Healthcare Services and Barney Gomez. So we should have interesting programs for you to watch this next couple of months. Make sure you tune in, though. You can watch our show live, obviously, on webcast, and you can also watch it on Channel 17. And it's actually rebroadcast Friday, Saturday, and Sunday on the show. So remember, we look forward to seeing you next time, and please let us know what we can do to make the show more interesting and more apropos for your interest and enjoyment. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good job.
Was that good?
Okay.
Okay.